All right, so let's go ahead and get started. My name is Wildman. I am the Assistant Director of Admission here at the Tulane School of Architecture, and I'm joined by Dean Iñaki Alday and Professor Laura Blokker. I'll give them a chance to introduce themselves here in just a second. But before we get started, just want to give an overall format of the event. So Dean Alday will give an introduction to the school overall and kind of give an overview of preservation in relation to the school, and then we'll hand that over to Laura to give a full overview of the Master Preservation Studies program. And then after that, we'll have a Q&A portion. At the bottom of your screen, or at the bottom of the window where you're viewing this webinar, you should see a Q&A button. If you click on that, you're able to submit questions either anonymously or with your name. And if you'll submit questions throughout the entire presentation, we'll get to those questions at the end. So as you think of questions, as questions come up, submit those through the Q&A, and then we'll take care of those towards the end. But I'll hand it over to Laura to introduce herself, and then over to Dean Alday to introduce the school.
Greetings, everyone. I am Laura Ewan Blokker. I am a faculty member with the Preservation Studies program and interim director. So I will look forward to explain a little bit more what I do with the program as I present. Welcome.
Hello all, thank you for joining this event. Good afternoon, gorgeous afternoon here in New Orleans for those who are attending live and wherever when you are listening to this online. Welcome to this gorgeous city. It's full of history. It's the American dream of historic architecture. As you know well, this city has surprised me when I arrived 2 years ago as dean, for its beauty, its balance, its great life, and the sense of humor. This is a place where people laugh at things at themselves, have a great time, but it's a paradigm of culture, as you know, of music, of fun, of beauty of nature, and of architecture, of course, of historic architecture. And it's also a paradigm of the world's most pressing challenges: social and racial complexity, environmental crisis, economic disparity, and an enormous, extraordinary built fabric. Let me introduce myself. I am the Dean of the School of Architecture, Iñaki Alday. I'm an architect coming from Barcelona, where I keep my architectural office, designing buildings, landscapes, and urban plans. I'm not a preservationist, but as many European architects, we have done quite a number of restorations. And right now we are, for instance, restoring the palace where we have our office. We don't have the office in the Piano Nobile, as you can imagine. It's a gorgeous 17th century palace. We are tenants above, but we are doing our work as architects and historic preservationists in a way, restoring the chapels, the dancing ball, the halls, the dining rooms, and all that. So I personally, while not being a specialist, I personally love preservation, restoration, and historic architecture. Let me introduce also Tulane. Tulane is the smallest of the top American university. It's one of the 45 Tier 1 research universities. This is a group in the US and Canada. And being small is also a very nimble and very flexible and very fast and very collaborative university. It's also a special university because of its origin. It's almost 200 years ago founded to fight yellow fever. So we have never been an ivory tower. The School of Architecture is the smallest school in campus, but is one of the most special and central. We were instrumental in the rebuilding of New Orleans, in the recovery of extraordinary pieces of historic architecture after Hurricane Katrina. So the School of Architecture is never in an ivory tower. We really work in life challenges and solutions. And preservation has an enormous role. Preserving structures is the most energy and material efficient approach. And at the same time, gentrification and social issues are often unsolved matters in preservation. So we are here in New Orleans Tulane is the school that is focusing in the most relevant problems of today and in the very near future, how we are going to inhabit the planet in the next 20, 30 years, and especially in the most vulnerable territories in the world, the Delta of the Mississippi, an example of that, with an enormous amount of built fabric and historic architecture that needs to be an important plan of how we are inhabiting, what we are keeping, what we are preserving, what we are transforming, how we are dealing with our cities. We need to deal with taking leadership in this discussion, in how architecture and preservation is essential in front of climate change and social issues and the process of urbanization of the planet, and the challenges for social and environmental justice. We need to make serious changes to our cities, to our buildings, to our infrastructures, how we are dealing with this, and how we, as preservationists, we are taking an important step in what means to inhabit the planet in a different way that is not about tearing down and consuming and building back again and then redo and redo and redo without any other issues that financial logics. So the school has always prided itself of educating excellent professionals. That's on the top of our objective. That's our vertical core. And we have architecture, preservation, and sustainable real estate, three of the most important fields for the built environment that you will enjoy connecting one with the other in wherever you are, in this case as preservationists, but connecting with designers, connecting with real estate developers, all with the same mission. As in a graduate program, you are going to be pushed really hard. This is your choice for professional life. So we expect commitment and excellency of all our graduates. We are planning our renovation of the building. As you can see behind me, is the lobby of Richardson Memorial Hall, virtual lobby, as you can imagine. But it's an extraordinary building. One of the great advantages of preservation at Tulane is that you would be in a historic building of extraordinary quality. It's not only a historic building of great value, it's also a lesson of quality of architecture, quality of spaces, quality of material, an extraordinary opportunity. And we are hoping to have a renovation going in the next 2 years, and it's a great opportunity to learn, to have a laboratory full scale. Together with the full-scale technology, the school is investing heavily in technology. You may see that typical School of Architecture for designers, but it's also very important for preservationists. The 3D printers and robotic arms are also for preservationists. 3D scanners do 3D models of historic elements, LiDAR, etc. So that's an important component for us and for you. So you are going to make a choice about where to study preservation. You will have to judge about the environment, not only the climate and the landscape, but also about the cultural complexity, the social diversity and the challenges, the environmental urgency, and of course, the physicality of the historic fabric that is around you. And therefore, which kind of preservationist you are going to be. We expect excellent professionals with very well-rounded education, with high professional ethics, with a very broad understanding of the field. Preservationists who can identify what is important and where to focus. And also let me be clear, preservation should be one of the most important national topics of conversation. We are surrounded by historic fabric everywhere, and it's our responsibility to bring it to the public. We judge cities and we judge the culture of the cities and the countries based in the historic architecture that is around us. So that's your role is essential in maintaining, in updating, in narrating, in telling the story of what the culture of the place, the successive layers of cultures that build a place physically and socially and culturally. So here we are in the Gulf Coast. This is a really exciting place to be. And this is where we are trying to define what architecture is, architecture in the very broad sense, and preservation is in more specific what preservation is in this moment of crisis, as you know, not only health, but also environmental and social crisis, but also a time to redefine what is the role of our discipline. So hope to welcome you in a few weeks from now and physically. Thank you. I'll leave the floor to Laura Blokker, the director of the program.
Thank you very much, Dean Alday. I am going to share my screen. So hopefully everyone can see my first slide now. Good. Okay. So I am starting with this slide. I want to show everyone a lot of pictures. Architecture and preservation are visual, and we are visual people, and I want to let a lot of pictures tell the story of what we do in the Master Preservation Studies program at Tulane and what you would be doing as students with us. And I start with this image in particular to illustrate a couple of points. The history of the program and the fact that it is not just a program, but it is a family. It is a network. We celebrated our 20th anniversary of the program a couple of years ago, and we had a wonderful party to celebrate, as we do well in New Orleans. And this is in one of our fabulous National Historic Landmarks in New Orleans. It is a building that our students have worked on in various classes through the years. So we have a relationship with the stakeholders of this building and the building itself, like we do with so many buildings and sites and properties throughout New Orleans and the greater region. And we got together to celebrate all of the experiences that we'd had together through the years in learning about preservation in the program and continuing to work together as preservationists afterwards. In the center of this image, you see in the front row, you see the founder of the program who continues to be involved as a professor emeritus. To his left is former director John Stubbs, who continues with the program as a senior professor of practice. And myself, standing on the right side of Professor Cizik, I am actually an alumna of the program as well. So I have a really long history of it and a wide view of what it is like to experience the program, both as a student. I well remember coming into the program 20 years ago, and that experience as well as a faculty member. This is our core curriculum. And you can find this on the website. At the bottom, there's a little note that says that our curriculum conforms to the standards of the National Council for Preservation Education. And it includes all of the things that the council and preservation educators since the beginning of preservation education in this country have established as core things that you need to learn in a graduate preservation program. So you will find, if you're comparing different programs, that there are many of the same core courses. They may have different names, but they have to cover architectural history. You have to have at least a couple courses in architectural history, preservation theory and practice, research and documentation methodologies, building conservation, so the actual materials, preservation technology, as well as preservation law and architectural and urban preservation planning. Another essential component is actual experiential practice in the field. So we cover all of these things in a very compact curriculum with 18 credits in the fall, 17 credits in the spring. So it is very rigorous. It is very intensive, but you cover the full breadth of the field. You don't have to pick a single track and decide what you want your niche in preservation to be. We want you to understand the full breadth so that you can work with colleagues, as Dean Alday was referencing, so that you understand the different aspects of it and you know enough to decide different directions that you want to go in the field. You may start off in one particular niche and then be able to shift into another area of it. So we want you to have a foundational understanding of everything. when you complete those first core semesters, you start moving into your practicum or thesis. That course is listed in the fall, or it can also be registered for in the spring, but really you are moving into that work over the summer. You are either working in what is deeper, more profound internship experience, more in depth as part of the practicum, or you are starting on your thesis research so that you build up to completion in the fall with graduation in December. So I'm going to go through each of the courses so you can get an idea of some of these specifics. But first, to our faculty. Our faculty are all practitioners. We have a mostly adjunct faculty, which I think is really essential in a field like ours, because we are all engaged day to day with how the profession is changing, with what it takes to work in the field. We want you to come out of the program with a really good basis in theory and be able to take that to a big picture idea of preservation. We want you, while you're in the academy, to be able to explore academic research, but we also want you to be able to have the skills that are being used in the real world in actual jobs and can get a job immediately. And we kind of pride ourselves on having the type of graduates that employers can count on, knowing that they have the competencies they need to do the work. One of the first major courses is the Studio in Building Preservation. Studios meet for 4 hours, 3 days a week. You do a lot of work together in groups with your cohort. Our cohorts are a really important part of the program. We have fairly small cohorts of 12 to 17, and you have most all of your classes together, so you become very close and establish a really good working relationship, and as well as friendships. Because we accept people from all different backgrounds. We have people who come from an architecture background, but we have people who come from history or anthropology or chemistry or biology. Everyone brings their own professional and educational background to the field of preservation, which is very interdisciplinary. And we find that everyone's individual strengths contribute to the understanding of the group. So working with all of your classmates becomes a really influential part of the program, that everyone really enjoys the relationships that they establish throughout this. So in the studio, in the building preservation studio, you learn all about the documentation of individual historic buildings, structures, sites. And of course, we do this with real properties, and we have an incredible benefit from being in New Orleans, and not just in New Orleans, but we make sure to go outside of New Orleans as well, to some of the more rural areas, some of the smaller towns, so that you get a cross-section of urban conservation as well as rural and small town experiences. So this is a property that the studio focused on a couple years ago. To show you some of the work that students complete in studio. Every year since the founding of the program, one of the first projects in studio has been documentation of an individual tomb. If you are not familiar, in New Orleans, we have above ground tombs, and they are like little buildings. So they are perfect individual beginning projects to get everyone on the same plane of skills and springing forward into larger, more complicated buildings and group works. So we have a whole archive of these drawings that have been done through the years. We do all kinds of different things as needed in the studio. So that can include things like paint analysis. This past year, the students in studio did a wonderful exhibit based on analysis that they had done from one of the specific properties that they were focused on. We also don't just look at buildings, we look at bridges as well, other kinds of structures. Moving on into our history class. I teach the history of American architecture, and I feel that this is a course that is quite different from the history of architecture courses so many people have had. This comes from my own personal experience working in the field after taking years of many architectural history courses in the United States as well as abroad, and then getting into the field and realizing so much of what I'd been taught wasn't applicable to the day-to-day work that I was doing, which included many more everyday buildings, much more vernacular architecture. And so I bring more of those everyday buildings into the conversation to understand how high style spreads out and trickles down into more of the environment that we live with all around us. We also focus on a lot of real world type of projects in our courses to the extent that we can. So for example, instead of doing a research paper in this course, we do a National Register of Historic Places nomination, which is a really foundational exercise in historic preservation, so that you can come out of the program saying, yes, I can do this. I'm confident, I've already done one. And students actually have the option to either leave it as a class assignment and stop there, or to move forward to actual listings. So the 4 buildings you are seeing in this slide are all buildings that students did nominations for and successfully had listed on the National Register of Historic Places. Our historic preservation law seminar is taught by one of our professors who has been with the program from the beginning. Professor Sonny Shields actually studied architecture before going into law, and he is a wonderful professor that students love from his long and profound history with environmental law. Then we have a U.S. Field Studies and Advocacy course. This involves a lot of field trips and really gets you out and seeing how people work in day-to-day preservation operations, understanding how they do what they do and what impact it has. So it allows you to also start building a professional network. As part of this course, we do a trip to a conference every semester, typically to the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and that travel is supported by funding through the program. Then we have a GIS course for historic preservation. GIS has been around for quite a while now, but all of the applications that it has are still just being explored, and we're really at the tip of the iceberg for this incredibly powerful tool. So this course not only teaches basic use of GIS, but really looks into all of the ways that it can be applied to help us better understand our historic built environment and plan for its futures. Moving on into the spring. The spring studio goes outward from the individual building preservation of the fall and looks at urban conservation, so planning for whole streetscapes, entire blocks. And again, we look not just at specific areas of New Orleans, but in other places in the surrounding area. One of the wonderful things about New Orleans is that it is at once a big city with all of the very urban challenges, issues of big cities all around the world, but it is a small enough scale that you can really get to know people, you can have an impact, and we can get outside of the geographic region to these other areas surrounding. This is a presentation that students did a couple of years ago, looking at the challenges here on Canal Street, which are applicable across the country, where we have so many buildings that are being used commercially on the ground level, while the upper levels sit vacant, because they were originally used for residential purposes, which now face challenges for egress because of the way that they're joined together, and the difficulty of bringing a lot of these buildings up to today's codes. So they did an excellent project looking at this for some national stakeholders as well as local stakeholders. We are always very attuned to our stakeholders and work with people who are invested in these projects and who actually come to the program and ask for help specifically. Another example of this outside of New Orleans, of a project that we were asked specifically to get involved with, is in Natchez, Mississippi. And this was work that was done for the city of Natchez, looking at creating an arts district. So students evaluated all of the buildings in a set area, collectively, individually, looked at potential uses, potential design interventions, etc. In the spring, we also have a history of New Orleans architecture course. This is taught by another one of our veteran faculty who has works as a preservation architect and has seen in so many of the buildings throughout the city. He really has an encyclopedic knowledge of New Orleans architecture, but it is not just a course on New Orleans architecture. It is using New Orleans buildings as specific examples, but of so many of the architectural influences, construction history that we see nationwide. So it is not, just this niche topic. It is really applicable to architecture across the country. It is more about a way of looking at it and understanding how buildings go together and how that knowledge translates into work as a preservation architect or a preservation consultant. And we have a specific preservation technology course where you get into specific materials, their pathology, that is the way that they deteriorate, the way that they break down, how we intervene, how we can study them to understand what is going on in any given building. So you look specifically, for example, at metals, at stone, at terracotta and brick, at wood. Then we have an economics and practice of historic preservation course. This is really essential, and economics is something that has been emerging in preservation education more recently. It is not covered by every program, but if you think about all the things that we need to understand to preserve our built environment, the funding of it is a really essential one that we have to be engaged with. So we need to understand how buildings go together. We need to understand their history, planning, architecture. We also need to understand the law and the funding of it. How do all these mechanisms for finance work? And this is one of the sort of capstone-like courses that really transitions into that understanding of practice. The spring semester is also where we do an internship, which is different from the final practicum for people who choose that. The internship is done typically 1 day a week over the course of the semester, and it is a real opportunity to see a particular part of the field, even if you have worked in preservation before coming into the program, as I myself had before coming into the program. This allows you to see another side of it. It may perhaps be a way to get a foot in the door in a particular sector of the field, but it can also be a window into a particular facet of it that you might not work in, but it might be an area of the field that you will have to work on the other side of. For example, if you did an internship in the regulatory side of things, that could give you a huge understanding to work as a consultant or a preservation architect on the other end. A key part, and I think one of the real treasures of the program, is the international field studies. We take a trip every year to an international destination. Often they're in this hemisphere, so we can save some time and travel, but we have actually gone all over the world through the years. And this allows us to really dig into how things are done differently in terms of preservation other places. It's easy to start to imagine that the way preservation is done in the place where you're being educated or working is the way to do it, but there is no one way to do it. There are many ways to do it. And so we go and visit a specific location where we meet with the professionals working in the field there. And they explain to us exactly what their challenges are, how they are tackling them, and the different ways that their laws, their culture impact how they execute preservation. And finally, we have that preservation practicum or thesis. And this is where students take all that they have learned throughout those rigorous 2 semesters and pursue something that has taken their interest specifically. And that might be something hands-on. It might be something in law. It could be something in history. And we have a lot of flexibility for people to really learn what they want to do with our advising, pushing them forward, helping them make contacts. Some people choose sort of a combination of a practicum or thesis where they get an experience, but where they're working and they're learning and they're getting mentorship, but then they also write a full-length 100-page thesis. And this work can really help shape a certain level of expertise or specialization in the field that you might be surprised that you are known for after the program or sought after for years to come. So these are really special experiences. And when we see everyone do their final presentations all together for this, it is so wonderful to see the sort of culmination of the educational journey. What I presented at the beginning is the core curriculum, but there are other ways to add to that. So we have 3 graduate certificates within the school and the university that really complement preservation studies and are another credential that you can add to your education. So one of them is in sustainable real estate development. The courses for the certificate are primarily over the summer and then with one in the fall, so that keys in very nicely. Then at the university, there is a certificate in GIS. So those extra courses can be added on, just extending a semester and adding a GIS focus to the thesis. Then there is disaster resilience leadership, and this is, I think, a really amazing way that you can augment your preservation studies at Tulane, and quite unique, really. As Dean Alday was saying, we are in, the critical place for understanding this, have a tremendous amount of experience with disaster and resilience, especially I want to emphasize the resilience part. And a lot of our alumni have actually moved towards sectors of the field focusing on disaster recovery and on climate change and the intersection with preservation. Other things that we have going on at the school, we often have lectures, and we have just adopted this year, become the new home of the National Forum on Historic Preservation Policy. We are hosting the 8th one this fall, this October, which is going to focus on preservation and the 21st century city, looking at how national policy can be better integrated with local policies across the board as we look at all of the needs of the 21st century city, from affordable housing to health and wellness. And coming to the conclusion of the presentation, a lot of people think about what kind of jobs you're going to get after you finish your graduate education. I had the pleasure of running through all of our graduates from the past 5 years a couple years ago to do an internal study of the program. And as much as I keep in touch with all of our alumni and follow the wonderful things they're doing, when I had to go through every single one of our graduates, I was so impressed with the leadership positions that our graduates from just the past 5 years have, and where they are all over the country and the world as well. But again and again, executive director, director came up. And so this is just a small sampling that shows a lot of people have questions about, well, do your alumni stay in New Orleans? Do they go elsewhere? Both. Most people love New Orleans and would love to stay, but they also want to go where the job is most exciting to them, and that could be in the city. It could be across the country in LA. 2 of our recent graduates got jobs right away in Los Angeles. And then we also often have people that go and get that experience elsewhere and come back. So we really have alumni all over the country in all facets of the field. We are very proud of our alumni achievements, and we really do keep in touch and follow them. And I could spend a whole nother presentation talking about all of that, but just to highlight one who also happens to be one of our faculty members, Danielle Del Sol, who is on the left of your screen towards the top, was named by the National Trust for Historic Preservation as one of their 40 under 40 movers and shakers, expanding our view of what it means to save places. So I think this says a lot for the national potential and exposure for our alumni as well. And that is it for the presentation. I will welcome questions.
Thank you, Laura. I want to encourage everyone to submit questions to the Q&A, but we'll get started out with one question. How does New Orleans function as a full-scale classroom or laboratory for the Master Preservation program?
In so many ways. We, as I was saying in the preservation, we regularly get calls from people asking if we can help them with their preservation of the property or site with which they are engaged. And that could be from a planning point of view. It could be, thinking about what the potential uses are for the property. How can it continue its life? Because that is really a key for preservation. We can, even if we could, you can save pretty much any building physically, right? So we could use all of our knowledge of materials conservation and analyze a building, but buildings always need uses to continue to be living, breathing parts of our everyday. So we look at how buildings actually continue to function and be an essential part of the community and the city going forward, as well as looking at how you actually preserve their materials, how you interpret their history, why their history is important to all of us, what it means to us in the present, what it means to the future, how it can inform us. So we have all of these different components that come into all of the projects.
Dean Alday, is there anything you want to add to that?
Well, it's the opportunity that New Orleans brings is amazing. If you have looked at at other programs, we build a house every year. We engage with the small center with community work, and especially in the preservation, we have the biggest laboratory that any school has, with hundreds of acres of historic fabric that we tackle in so many different ways, from material studies to paint analysis, to the analysis of structure, to cultural preservation as well. I remember last year was an amazing studio cataloging not only the building of a historic farmhouse owned by an African American from the very beginning 200 years ago, but also all the objects, furniture, all the pieces for living that was there. It's extraordinary the amount of possibilities that this huge laboratory that we are inserted has.
Awesome. One question we have coming in says, with COVID-19, what is happening to the preservation program as things are moving online?
So like everyone else across the country, we moved online this spring, and I have to say it went really well. I was actually amazed how smoothly everything went. We all were really prepared already. We are prepared at Tulane to be resilient in the face of disasters, and so we quickly shifted gears and moved everything online. We had to make some specific adjustments, especially for the more hands-on courses, but we have done that for all of them. Looking forward to the fall, we are preparing if there is the necessity to move online, but we are very hopeful that we will be able to be engaged fully in person.
Yes, we are planning as a university to be in person in the fall, but we are working with the two scenarios at the same time. It would be an easy shortcut that other universities are doing in terms of uncertainty to just move online. We are hopeful that the in-person will be available, even if there are some travel restrictions and other issues. We will be preparing the school and the spaces of work to have the distancing that is required and as needed. But we will do our best to provide with the experience in the place. And if not, we are ready for everything. Being in New Orleans, if something we know is that things happen. In this case, it's not a hurricane, it's a virus. But we are probably the best prepared university to deal with circumstances like that. So what we are sure is that we need to cut levels of uncertainty in the sense of there will be excellent education in any case, whatever the circumstances are.
Another question, and Laura, I'll defer this question to you. What is the final deadline of submission for applications for fall 2020? I know we're on a rolling basis. We do accept applications on a rolling basis, but is there kind of any deadline that you would like to mention?
Yes, so we do accept the applications on a rolling basis. It is better to bring the cohort together. The sooner the better, obviously, and allow for relocation, especially for people coming out of state. That said, we will accept applications through July.
And one last question that we have so far. So, in comparison to other programs that other students might be considering, how does Tulane, and specifically the city of New Orleans, what kind of opportunities does that bring that kind of set the program apart from other programs?
Of course, I'm incredibly biased, but I think that our location is an undeniable asset. It is really incomparable, and I think it's important for people to understand that it's not as if you study in New Orleans that you are only learning about New Orleans. It really is a very global place, again, with the urban challenges you face anywhere, but with this amazing historic stock. And where one of the things that I would say is that I sort of touched on earlier is that because of the scale of the city, you really get to be one-on-one with other professionals in a way that I don't think you get to necessarily in some of the larger cities. We are super focused on making sure that you have that academic, theoretical foundation, but are very practical. We are very, very practical in thinking about how we address the profession and how we prepare you for your practice in the field. I think also the certificate options that I highlighted are really unique to us. You don't see those same type of offerings elsewhere. And even if you don't pursue one of those certificates, you have the opportunity to take classes in any of those things. So being on a campus where we are focused in disaster resiliency, being able to interface with the other programs at the school, like sustainable real estate development, who we really have close ties with, in addition to architecture, being able to take advantage of faculty across the curriculums, I think is a tremendous strength. And I could go on.
Yeah, I would like to add just a couple of issues as observant. Yes, Tulane program is one of these three historic programs in the US with Penn and with Columbia. And maybe an important difference to these other contexts of cities like New York or Philadelphia is that the complexity of the layers that this city has no equal. So it's a city that has this historic layers of French, Spanish, Anglo-Saxon, Caribbean, and it also faces social questions that are not so prevalent in other places, and how those social questions intersect with preservation, and finally the environmental questions that we are forced to ask ourselves here. In a way, it's one of these three programs, but in a way, I see it as very different in terms of the questions, the deep questions that the inquirers we have.
We have a question from Francesca. Do we have any direct network ties to Canadian and or British preservation firms and or private shareholders?
No, I can't say that we have a direct established network. We have very broad networks generally, especially with the world experience of Professor Stubbs. So generally we are able to make connections, you know, where students are seeking those across the world anywhere.
It's important to notice that Tulane is a national and international university. We are not a regional university, and it has the difficulties of having a smaller local base, although in New Orleans the preservation community is huge, as you can imagine. And the advantage of extending the network all over the country and beyond. So we typically have the opportunities of having alumni in most places, and alumni that are very committed to all the graduates of Tulane School of Architecture, not of a particular program.
Great. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I want to thank everyone for attending tonight. And again, we are recording this session, so if there's anything you missed, or if there's anything you need a little clarity on, this will be published on our website later this week. If you have any follow-up questions, you can always reach out to Dean Alday, to Laura, or myself with any questions about the program or about the application process. We're happy to answer those for you. But in the meantime, thanks again for coming by, and we hope to hear from you all soon.
Thank you. Thank you very much for attending. I'm very much looking forward to meeting you in person in August in this gorgeous city. And as I have heard many times, the most exciting city in America for a preservationist. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I look forward to further communication.